Welcome to the Views Unfolded podcast, episode 4. Is it personal or is it just me? Today I'm in Sweden, sitting in front of the trees in the autumn colors, watching as the leaves fall. I felt like it was the perfect setting for this conversation. And in this episode, I want to talk about something that I'm currently working through myself. And I haven't quite figured it out yet, but I thought it might be helpful to share my thoughts in real time and take you along on this journey as I try to make sense of it all. I also feel like there are many themes that actually go into all of this at once. But let's just see what unfolds and where it takes us together. And at the core of this episode is a question that I've been reflecting on a lot. Is it personal or is it just me? And as we explore, I'll touch on how projection, the fear of judgment, people pleasing, and even boundaries all tie into that question. Do you ever feel like no matter how much you show up for others, there's this sense that the energy just isn't being reciprocated? You're there for someone, listening, caring, making them feel valued. And even when you're not doing well yourself, you find it in you to put your feelings aside and be there for theirs. Somehow, it never quite feels like they're doing the same for you. Well, I find myself in this space often, and it's quite exhausting. And it's led me to pause and question, is it really about them, or is it something inside of me that's projecting onto the situation? This idea of projection plays a big role in how we take things personally. Sometimes the way we feel about ourselves, our fears, our past hurts show up in these moments of tensions with others. So when we think it's about them not valuing us, sometimes it's really about us not feeling valued by ourselves or from past experiences. For instance, I noticed that when I meet new people, there's always this part of me that automatically assumes that they don't like me, even before giving them a real chance to get to know me. I tell myself that it's my intuition, that I can just sense when the energy is off. But what if that's not always the case? What if it's actually fear or past hurt speaking rather than my intuition? And this makes me wonder, am I really perceiving them clearly? Or am I letting my own insecurities filter how I see the situation? And this is when the line between what's personal and what's projection is blurry. I remember reading somewhere a while ago that trauma can actually be created from the smallest of events, and that it's the brain who decides what leaves a deeper mark. They took as an example something like if a child asks for ice cream and they're told no very strictly, this can, as a grown adult, result in being afraid to ask for something because you expect a very sharp response back. And when you think about the incident today, It doesn't seem like something bad to tell a child no for ice cream, but the brain decided in that moment that it would be engraved in you due to the emotions that you experienced in those moments. And then I think about all the little things that could have planted that fear. Something as small as that sharp no might have shaped how I ask for things today. What if what we feel is rejection today is simply the results of these early experiences and not how things actually are? And when we react to current situations, sometimes it's less about what's happening in the present and more about what we've carried with us from the past. So when we ask, is it personal or is it just me? It's important to consider how much of our reaction is tied to these older wounds. I started to see that perhaps a lot of these responses I have are actually defenses against feeling like I'm not enough. They might be rooted in a fear of rejection and the fear that maybe people won't value me as I value them. But what if instead of assuming that the distance or the lack of reciprocation is because of something that's wrong with me? Maybe it's not about me at all. Maybe the other person has their own struggles, their own anxieties, their insecurities, or maybe they just had a bad day. Maybe the way they react isn't a reflection of who I am, but of what they're dealing with right now. So next time I feel this way, I'm just going to try and ask myself, what might this person be dealing with that I'm unaware of? And when we shift our perspective and consider that someone else's reaction might not be personal, it opens the door to compassion as well. It's not about dismissing your feelings, but recognizing that their actions might be more about what's happening in their world rather than a reflection of something that you did. Let's try to live in the other person's shoes for a moment. A moment that stands out to me was when I gave someone a compliment and they didn't really take it well. They somehow thought that it was back ended, and I could immediately sense the tension. I remember feeling this rush of guilt and my brain immediately going, what did I say wrong? Was it my tone? Did I mess up? But instead of letting it linger, I clarified myself. I said, hey, I actually really meant that compliment. And right away, I saw a shift in their energy. They smiled, they relaxed, they actually got happy about the compliment instead. So at the end of the day, it wasn't about what I had said to the person, it was just how they initially perceived the comment because of their own insecurities and their past experiences. And that moment made me think, how often do I do the same thing? Like, how often do I misunderstand others because I'm expecting rejection or judgment? At the end of the day, I think a lot of it boils down to the fear of judgment. Even if it's something that I worked with a lot on myself, somehow it still creeps in on me, especially when it comes to my closest relationships. I feel like I never want to disappoint people. And when I feel like I've been judged, I take it as if I've let them down in some way. And then it leads me to overcompensate, having me show up in ways that aren't always true to myself, just to avoid that feeling of judgment and disappointment. But here's the thing, people's judgment often come from their own fears and concerns. They might genuinely care about us, but simply not know how to express it in a way that feels supportive. So instead, it comes out like judgment. But even if we understand their perspective, it doesn't make it hurt less when we hear this judgmental tone. It's still hard. But maybe part of the journey is also learning to let go of the idea that we can or should control how others see us, or even care about how others perceive us. Learning to be okay with being misunderstood and trusting that those who really care about us will either take us as we are or stay long enough to understand eventually. Sometimes we also just need to understand that people see things through the lens of their own experiences. It's actually hard for us as humans to understand someone else's position if we haven't experienced the same things. So then your experience becomes foreign to that person, and automatically it triggers a response in them to tell you that you're wrong. When in fact, you're most likely not. It's just them judging you through their own lens of life and experiences. Oftentimes, people think of my lens as rose colored and that I just have too much hope and wishes for life, and I should just live in the reality of life as it is. For example, I've been told that my optimism about following my passions isn't realistic, but I've also seen the beauty of it and what it brings to my life. And if I lose a part of me, I lose something very important to myself. And that's just not how I work because it doesn't work for me. And if I were to listen to the judgment and take my rose colored lenses off, it would not lead me anywhere in life. So, why would I change myself and my views on life based on someone else's lenses? We are not the same. How boring would that be? And then on the other side, maybe we should just align more with people who understand us instead. And when those people give us a critique on life, it's not based on judgment, but truly something that is intended as a different perspective rather than a fear based response. Because it's not always that we are projecting our feelings onto others. Sometimes it's just that we're around the wrong people who don't understand or accept us at our core. Because I also have friends and family who, on the contrary, accepts me, even if they don't live the same life as me or have the same lens as me. When they disagree with something in my life, they simply give perspective rather than judging. The difference is that supportive people often ask questions instead of making assumptions, and they make you feel heard rather than judged. One approach that I've found helpful is deciding ahead of time how much access I want to give certain people to my emotional world or what's going on in my life. Not everyone deserves to see every part of us, and that's okay. So there might actually be two parts of the solution. to all of this. One is becoming at peace with the fact that people judging you doesn't always have to do with you, but their own belief systems. And next time you feel judged, maybe pause for a moment before reacting and ask yourself, is this judgment actually about me or is it about them? That can be helpful in neutralizing the triggers when they appear and reminding ourselves that you simply disagree with that person's view on life. And understand that what leads your heart is not the same as what leads someone else's heart. So then we can maybe come at peace with the fact that we're all simply living different lives and they don't have to align. And the second part is that maybe we should let go of certain relationships and value those who accept us for who we are instead. And if it's a family member or someone you're not willing to let go of, perhaps we try to set better boundaries with them and mend that part of the relationship. I know that sometimes people are also just the way they are, especially family members, and you simply can't change them or mend the relationship. And in that case, if you still want them in your life, maybe we should try and work on the parts of us that are afraid of judgment and of disappointment, getting into the real reasons on why we feel this way and actually dissolving them. This way, perhaps we reach a point where we don't even flinch at people's judgmental comments, but instead we remind ourselves that it's our journey and that nobody can understand our journey better than ourselves. So, if you've ever felt like it's about you and people just don't like you, or that you're always the one giving more, I want to remind you and myself that oftentimes it's not about us at all. Sometimes people are just doing their best with whatever they're carrying, just like we are. And maybe the real work isn't in trying to change how they react to us, but in changing how we respond to their reactions. Let's try and give more compassion, both to them and to ourselves. Thank you for joining me in this episode, and I hope it sparked something for you as it did for me. And if this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your experiences and let's unfold these layers together, one thought at a time. See you next week.